Okay, fine. Sorry, let's start all over again. So here is the evidence for the positron discovery from Anderson around I thought 1932, but it says 1933. Just look at the figure. In the center, you can see this horizontal line. That's actually a lead plate. So what happens is that when a particle goes through a lead plate, the lead is so dense, right, that it loses energy. Fine. So you can see what happens. So now there is a magnetic field, and the magnetic field is actually pointing into the screen, so into the board. Now I want you to tell me, okay, why this is a positron. So let me give you all the facts. I said the magnetic field is into the board. Here a particle is coming in. So this line that you can see over here, right? The
Due to
lower
opposite
line.
charges.
Sorry.
And due to opposite charges, I mean, the Lorentz force will act oppositely
So no,
on.
no. But how do you know that? So let us see. Suppose the particle is coming from below. That's what it says. The positron
Right
entered in
hand
the lower
side.
left, right? So if it enters in the lower left, then the velocity is pointing upwards. The magnetic field is going into the screen, and therefore the force is on the left, right? Because the force is Q V cross B, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So therefore V is upwards, B is inside, so the force is to the left, and therefore it bends to the left. Okay, but suppose the particle was coming from above, then V is downwards, B is into the board, then it will bend to its right, which means that it will bend this way. Okay, so whether it is an
Yes, ma'am.
electron or a positron, because for the positron the force is plus V cross B, I mean in units of E, and for the electron it is minus V cross B because the charge is negative, right? So either this is a positron going upwards, turning left, or it's an electron going downwards, turning right. Is it clear? So the key question, and that's really the great thing about this lead plate, that's really why he got the Nobel Prize for this discovery, is that here you have an iron plate where the particle loses energy. Okay. Now, what do you know about a charged particle in a magnetic field? Let us say that the magnetic field is perpendicular to the direction of motion. What is the trajectory of the particle?
Circular motion.
Helical.
Helical. Yeah, circular.
Circular. So this is actually part of a circle. So this curved line that you can see is part of a very large circle. Okay. Now this is the lead plate over here. It has lost energy. So you can see that the curvature has become more. It is part of a smaller circle. Can you see that? So this is part of a larger circle. This is part of a smaller circle when it exits the lead plate. Now it cannot gain energy from the lead plate. So that means the particle is moving upwards. Is it clear? The particle had more energy here, lost energy in the lead plate, and went upwards with less energy. Therefore, the particle direction, the velocity direction is upwards. And from the bending and the fact that the particle velocity is upwards, you know that this is a positron. Is it clear? So
Okay.
without the lead plate, there would be nothing to tell. It's just a circle, right? In a circle, you don't know whether the path was upwards or downwards. So this lead plate achieves that distinction between up versus down going particle. Such a nice experiment, right? And you can see that it's just from Wikipedia.
How he get this picture?
Here, Wikipedia. As I said,
No,
No, ma'am. How he get the
Anderson.
the
picture?
cloud chamber. Oh
Anderson.
my god. Okay, no. We already lost half the. I cannot go through all of them, but there's something called a cloud chamber technique. See, please go and read. This is 1932. Okay, you
Okay,
can
ma'am.
see how long ago it is. So what you do is that you have a chamber, as it says, there's a chamber, and it's filled with some. I don't remember what kind of gas. Okay, but what happens is that when the charged particle goes through, it condenses the gas around it, and because of that, there are dots like this over here, and they show up as a track. Okay. Now, what exactly is inside it, I don't know, or maybe I never knew or forgotten. I don't know which, but that's basically how it works. So then, what happens is that when you see this, you trigger a photographing equipment, which then actually takes a photograph of this. So you have thousands of such photographs. You should be glad you are not, PhD students in those times, because then you just sort through the photographs one by one, and all the particles were discovered. So this is the positron discovery. You remember we talked about strangeness, K meson, right? So because strange SS bar is produced in pairs, right, in strong interactions, because you cannot violate strangeness quantum number in strong interactions. So you will find two strange particles producing two sets of K mesons, and all of them were found in these cloud chambers. So here you can see, I can click on it, and I can ask open in new tab, and at some point we will look at the tab and see what it says. Okay, because I just want to move on from there. Okay. So if you want to can look
Ma'am,
it
in this experiment,
here.
what are the
So
input
it contains
parameters?
supersaturated either water or alcohol. Okay. So that the ionized gas particles actually shows as a this thing, then you photograph it.
Ma'am,
So Carl Anderson got the Nobel Prize in 36. You said ask, sorry.
ma'am, how do you measure a exact mass of any particle? Means how can you measure?
Mass is a different question. Okay, many particles which are produced in S-channel processes. Now you know what is S-channel, right? E plus E minus coming together will give you S-channel process. E minus mu minus scattering was T-channel process, right? So in S-channel
Okay.
process, you actually the final state will add up to the invariant mass of that particle. I will show you the LEP experiment where we will see that E plus E minus, if it is exactly root S is equal to mass of the Z, then it produces just the Z boson at rest. We will come to that. So I actually hold the question until then, okay? Because I'm just going over various things. So this is the positron discovery. This was the very first discovery. After that came this experiment which I called LEP, uh, uh, Large Electron Positron Collider. Uh, so as the name suggests, the electron and positron collided with each other. And as I also just said, it first collided with each other at energies which were exactly enough to produce the mass of the Z boson. So root S was actually mz, but since at that time Z was discovered, so they didn't know what mz was. So they kept on increasing the root S until they found the resonance, the bright Wigner resonance, which showed the Z production. And after the LEP experiment was successfully finished, they dismantled the whole experiment, and in the same place they have put the LHC experiment where two protons collide. And one of the most famous discoveries of LHC was the Higgs discovery about 10 years ago. So let us now go to LEP. So here is LEP. Okay, so there were four detectors at LEP, and this is one of the experiments. So that is because this UK university was associated with the LEP Opal detector. So LEP is a very clean experiment because in the initial state you have only electron positron. So you can see that. Okay, some things are cut off for me. Let me just move the screen so I can see it. Okay, so it is an electron positron machine. And first, it operated at the center of mass, which was the mass of the Z boson. So it just produces Z boson at rest. And that was in the early 90s. And finally, in 2000, it went up to about 200 G. Okay. And this is a very nice question paper, actually, but he has given the answers as well. So we will go over these events one by one. Okay. So how does
Are
the
they
LEP
still showing
experiment?
the Anderson's
No, the
image?
Anderson was finished. The Anderson was finished.
Are you still showing his image on your screen?
No, I am showing the LEP experiments.
No, ma'am,
But
we
I
are
think
seeing the
But we
Anderson.
are seeing the
Anderson's
image.
Anderson's image we
Okay,
are seeing.
fine. In that case, I will stop share and start share again. Okay. Thanks for telling me. Yeah. Okay. Now can you see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So there is some glitch here. So I'm just sharing my entire screen. So you'll see my entire screen, but hopefully you should be able to see this large enough, right? Because it's not allowing me to show only my browser. So I guess it's okay. Right? Is it? If it bothers you, I can make it bigger. Okay, maybe that cleans it up a little more. Okay, fine. Let us look at this. So as I said, sorry, let me start all over again. So LEP first operated in the mode where it was at the Z mass. I mean, they discovered, in fact, the Z boson through this. by tuning with higher and higher root s until they got to the Z mass and found the peak. I will show you also that peak later. And then they went to higher energy all the way up to 200 GeV. And so they went off the Z peak. Okay. So they've made it, it's a question paper actually, but you can see that it's very nicely done. So we just concentrate one by one, we will see all the events. Okay. So this is the beam pipe. There are two views shown over here. You can see a circle over here. This is the beam pipe. So you can think of a beam where the electron and positron come back to back with equal and opposite momentum. That's the center of momentum frame. And they're colliding at the center point. Okay. So we're looking along the beam. And this is the first. So that is called the XY view. And the second one is we are looking perpendicular to that. So that is the YZ view. Okay. So you're seeing it in two different views. Okay. So first, to understand, he has given the basic hints. So the first part is what is called a tracking chamber, okay, where the charged particles leave tracks. So if it is a photon, which then say decays to some, which produces say electron, positron or something like that, the photon will not leave any track in this central circular part. Is this clear? So the blue line in the central circular part means we are dealing with a charged particle. Okay, they're charged particles. Now you cannot see the curvature of the track, but when they fit it to a curved track, you can see the curvature. Okay, and there's a magnetic field in the whole place, so they expect to see curved tracks, and from there they will know whether it's an E minus or E plus or a mu minus or mu plus. Outside the central tracking chamber is what is called the electromagnetic calorimeter. So any energy, the yellow energy that is deposited there, tells you that some electromagnetic particle is coming and having electromagnetic interactions with the detector. Outside that is what is called the hadronic calorimeter, and all hadronic particles will deposit energy there. And way outside, if there is energy deposited, that is usually the muon, because the muon travels the furthest. Because the muon interacts least with all matter. Okay, so remember this. So blue is the tracking, yellow is the electromagnetic thing. So we will ask the question, and since we are just beginning, we will answer the question also. Question is, what is the event? So LEP is an E plus E minus machine. It just produces Z naught. Now the question is, how do you know that it's a Z naught, right? You never see a Z naught, because this is what I said. Anything massive like this will simply decay. It has decayed into an electron-positron pair. Since the Z naught was produced at rest, it produces electron-positron back to back. If you take the momentum of this, so you can add up the momentum of the particles here. You can add up, you can find out from the detector what is the energy here and the energy here. And you can find the center of mass energy of the particle which decayed into E plus E minus. And you will find here, for example, it is actually given. I don't want to spend time on it, but you can go over it and you will see that the sum of these two, see 44 plus 46 is about 90, and the mass of the Z boson is 91.2 G. Okay? And there is the error bar.
How do you increase the particle's energy during its rotation if you want to?
There is no rotation. There's a fixed momentum now. No, you have a fixed electron positron. Let us say that through the beam pipe, it has come. I don't know. You can't see my finger, I guess. So let us say that this is the screen, and the view that I am showing you on the left-hand side, the electron is coming into the screen, and the positron is approaching the screen from behind, and they have collided at the central part.
Okay.
And the final state electron and positron have gone this way, and you can see it in two views. They are back to back, and then it adds up to the mass of the Z boson. Up till here is okay. So each process is very nicely graded so that it becomes more and more complicated. So this is the Feynman diagram for the process. E plus E minus goes to Z, which then decays to E plus E minus. Let us not, I don't want to talk about the physics. We will do that anyway in the class. So let us go to the second event. So second event, now you can see that it has a track. It's a charged particle. It leaves small amount of energy, as you can see in the, it leaves a small amount of energy in the electromagnetic calorimeter. It leaves some amount of energy in the hadronic calorimeter. But then you can see that this arrow is not, there's an arrow here, light blue arrow here, and there's a light blue arrow here. And the arrow indicates that the muon chambers also have deposits in them. There are events or energy deposition in the muon chamber. So that means this is a muon, it's a charged particle, it has a track. It leaves small amount of energy in the electromagnetic calorimeter. It leaves small amount of energy in the hadronic calorimeter, and then goes all the way out to the outside. You can see a photograph sometime. Always the muon chamber is outside, because as I said, the muon travels the furthest, and therefore this is the same Z boson going to mu plus mu minus rather than E plus E minus. And you can see again the momentum of the particles adds up to about 90 GeV. So 45 plus 45, and these are the error bars. Okay. Is it clear? So what? Oh, sorry, that bottom is missing. What is the event? Here you can see the event is Z dot decaying to mu plus mu minus through a similar process. Is it clear? So you can also see that Z dot will decay to tau plus tau minus. Z dot will decay to QQ bar of all kinds. Z dot will decay to neutrino, antineutrino. When Z dot decays to neutrino, antineutrino, since neutrinos are very weakly interacting particles, these neutrinos will not be seen in the detector. So we will keep this in mind when I come back to Z width. I will come back to it probably 20 lectures down the line, but I will remind you of it anyway later. Okay. Now we can go to a little more complicated diagram. This is something interesting. So they have zoomed up this left side. This is not the YZ view. This is just the same thing zoomed up. Can you see that the two light blue lines meet here? Can you see my cursor?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I don't want to zoom anything in case we lose the screen. So here is actually where the collision takes place. You can see that there are charged particles going in both directions, some amount of energy in the electromagnetic calorimeter. Here, both electromagnetic, hadron, and a muon in this direction. But you can see that there are two lines which only end up here. Okay. So you can see, let us read the description. So actually what is happening is that in the tracking chamber, when the photon is coming out, so this from this point, the central dot up to this vertex, there is no track at all. That was a photon. But this tracking chamber has material. So when that photon hits this material, there is a chance that it converts into E plus E minus. And you can see, if you look very closely, that these two tracks are bending in opposite directions. I don't know which is which. I don't remember the magnetic field direction. So it says over here, in fact, one is minus, one is plus. Anyway, you can see that one is a positron, one is an electron. So this is the event. You can see it's a very complicated event. Z naught goes to, that's what I said, exactly like this. It's of mu plus mu minus. I can have tau plus tau minus. Tau can decay into many, many things because it's a very heavy electron. So there are two taus, one tau here and one tau here. So in this direction, okay, you can see that tau has decayed into something which only gives you electron or electromagnetic energy. Here it also gives you a muon. So that means you can see that in one of the cases, which is the bottom, let me try to get both of them in the same graph, in the same page. Yeah. So here there is only tau going to electron. So we will see later that it's exactly like how neutron decays. Neutron decays to proton, and then electron neutrino, right? Tau will decay to nu tau, which is the neutrino, and then electron neutrino. So there are two neutrinos which are not detected, and only the electron is detected on one side. And on the other side, you can see that there is over here some hadronic energy, and then they have to, you can't simply do it by seeing. They add up the total momentum that is there, and it adds up to the rho meson. So the tau goes to a hadron, and of course nu tau to conserve lepton number on both sides. So it goes to a rho meson, which then decays also, and the decay components of the rho meson are seen here. So that's getting to a little more complicated, but basically Z can also go to tau tau. So you can see now you get even more events. Okay, so even more.
Ma'am, the electron positron production in the last picture.
Yeah.
Because of the electron, because of the photon.
Yeah.
Ma'am, this photon interacted with the medium in this.
This whole thing is not space, by the way. These are trackers. So what they're very, very fine pixelated objects. So that you can actually, these are not lines, but they are dots. Later on, I will show you actually the actual track in the LHC, because this is very old. This is like 20-year-old or 30-year-old detector. But I will show you the tracks in the new LHC. But basically what you have to see is that this line, even though it is drawn later by hand, actually corresponds to dot, 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 where energy was deposited in this very densely packed tracking chamber. So the tracking chamber has very small pixels, and the charged particle deposits energy in each pixel. So it really leaves literally, that's why it's called a tracking chamber. It literally leaves a dot, 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 dot track over there. And it's very finely pixelated because you can see that very energetic particles bend very little because the maximum energy is at the center. Then they lose energy as they go out. So to see the bending of this track, you have to have very, very finely pixelated detector so that you can actually join the dots and find that curvature. Okay, so this is the most sophisticated part of the detector, and then as you go outside, it's not as sophisticated. Okay, as you can see from the size of those pink and yellow things, right? Whereas this is a real fine line. Is it okay so far?
Yes, ma'am.
I
So this
hope- yeah.
electron positron production was a result of a secondary reaction, right?
Yes, it's secondary reaction. Yes, secondary reaction. That can also happen. Okay. So the tau can produce many things. Tau can just emit a photon as it's going, right? It can lose energy in many ways. All heavy particles can lose energy in many ways. So it was a needless complication, but it's there. You can just see what I mainly want you to notice is that in one direction tau decays to electron, in the other it clearly has decayed to a hadron. Okay. It's also very interesting that these events need not have been back to back, because the neutrinos, there are two neutrinos on this side and one neutrino on the other side, and they could have taken some of the energy, and this need not have been back to back. There would have been thousands of events where they were not back to back, but they are showing you for display an event where it is back to back so that you can understand it better. So they have pulled out events from the millions and billions of events that LEP has actually measured, and pulling out things so that for students it's easy to understand from simple to complex how these events look like in the detector. Okay, so that is the event. Now we have finished all the leptons, right? So we had Z going to E plus E minus, mu plus mu minus, and now tau tau bar, right? So now what is left? Obviously the quarks, right? So Z can go to Q bar. So what is the process now? E plus E minus comes in with exactly the momentum, which is half the mass of the Z, and then Z is produced at rest, and it decays into Q bar. So let us see this process. So again, there are the two views, but the other view is complicated. Let us look at the left side. Now you see how many tracks are there. In the electron case, there was one track. In the muon case, there was one track. In the tau, because it's massive, there were three tracks on one side and one on the other side. It tells you that there are many charged particles here. So now finally we come to what do you mean by observing quark? Quark can never be observed as it is because it is a colored object. So immediately when it is produced, within 1 Fermi of distance of its being produced, it hadronizes. That is, it converts into observable hadrons. And one quark actually can produce many, many hadrons. Only thing is that the mechanism by which these hadrons are produced is such that the hadrons also mostly go along the direction of the original quark which produced it. So it's not that the hadrons go all over the place. So clearly there is one quark which was going along this, where you can see this purple direction, right? And the hadrons that are produced are therefore clustered in what is called a jet around that central direction. So quarks produce jets. So two quarks produce two jets. We can see that. And these jets are therefore, because they are charged particles, they leave energy in the electromagnetic calorimeter, they leave energy in the hadronic calorimeter as well. Okay. And therefore, this is the process Z naught going to Q bar.
And from one quark, how are we getting too many hadrons? Like
Because
the process
one
of hadronization.
one quark hadronizes into many hadrons, and in fact, the process of hadronization is not well known because it is a non-perturbative process. It is extremely difficult to calculate. On the average, for example, one jet at LEP contains 21 hadrons on average. They are mostly pions. They can be K, even protons can be produced, even all our favorite particles which we talked about in spectroscopy like lambda, sigma, everything can be produced. Delta, all of them can be, but with much less probability. Mostly you have pions. Since pions are so light and these quarks have energy 45 GeV, you can understand that Many such hadrons can be produced. Okay, that is why you see all these things. And I said, although these tracks are very simplified over here, typically in a left jet, about 21 particles. I remember this from long ago. Yeah,
Hello?
ask the question.
These tracks are for single particle or are for
No, there are many hadrons. But you see, there is a jet, and all these particles fall inside a cone. Okay, that is called a jet cone. And you can see that there is very clean area between the two jets. There is nothing, there is no activity between the two jets because one quark went this way and the other quark. I can't tell whether it's quark or anti-quark. It is not possible to tell. But one quark went this way and one anti-quark went this way, maybe, or the other way around. And therefore, they're still roughly back to back. Okay. You can see that they're back to back. And in fact, you see the other side view. If you look at the XZ view, although there are so many particles and they're spread out, it is still a jet cone. Okay, and if you add up all the momenta, it will actually go in the direction which are back to each other. Okay, is this understood? So that is why the quarks are indirectly. So now I say, now what I mean by saying that quarks have actually been discovered is that jets have been observing them. So these jets are taken to be particles which are produced from a primary quark which has produced an interaction. And if two jets are produced, then it is a process Q bar.
So, ma'am, like you have written here Q, so there can be up quark, down quark.
Yes, all of them will be produced. In fact.
And they will have different energies as they have different. We are in a.
You can see that up to at Z mass is for 91 GeV. Okay, top quark is 180. Therefore, Z cannot produce top bar. So it can produce the 5. It can produce up to five quarks.
And they will have different energy.
But the thing is that the masses are so small. If you look at 5 GeV, even B mass compared to 45 GeV, the masses are very small compared to the energy available. So it's not that the masses are going to have produce or decrease the amount of B quark produced as opposed to U quark or D quark. They're all roughly produced in the same quantity. But we will actually do this process. We will calculate this process, E plus E minus, and we will goes to QQ bar, not through Z naught. We will produce it through maybe gamma because let us do it simply through electromagnetic interactions. But what we will understand is the following. One is that you can see this is an electromagnetic interaction. So the difference between E plus E minus, say, goes to mu plus mu minus and QQ bar is that the charges are different. So the charges are either 2/3 or minus 1/3. So there will be some small fractional quantity which will be different in the cross sections. Okay. However, sorry. Yeah, because E plus E minus goes to mu plus mu minus, the vertex factor would have been IE gamma mu. Let me show you here. Let us assume this is gamma, not Z, because I have not taught you Z so far, right? Then this vertex will have IE gamma mu. This will have IE gamma mu. So this is proportional to E square. So the square of the matrix element, the cross section is proportional to E power 4 or alpha square. If it is T quark bar, this side is still E, but this side is the quark charge. Let us say the quark charge is EQ times E. So this will be E into E is E squared times EQ. So if I square the matrix element to get the cross section, it will be proportional to EQ squared of the quark. But EQ squared is either 2/3 squared, which is 4/9, or 1/3 squared, which is 1/9. So it is some fractional number, but otherwise every other kinematic quantity will be the same. And if you do this calculation and check it and sum, because you don't know which quark is produced, you sum over all quarks, U, D, S, whatever, you will find that the cross section doesn't agree with your theoretical calculation. And how much does it differ by? It differs by a factor 3. And that is the final evidence. We will do all this in detail. That is the final evidence that quarks come in 3 colors. So I can produce red QQ bar, green QQ bar, blue QQ bar. And so the total cross section will be the sum over the 3 possibilities. And therefore the cross section should be 3 times what I expect. Okay. And we will see exactly that factor of 3 coming out when we do this, calculate this cross section some few classes from now.
And
so
ma'am,
the dynamical proof or evidence that quarks have color.
Hello.
Yeah, ask.
So, like, ma'am, can you go to the first process actually? Uh, yeah. So this only.
Oh, this one. This
So
is event 2.
yeah.
Huh?
So here the blue line in the first diagram.
There's one blue line.
Yes, ma'am.
So one particle. One
So
particle.
I mean, can it be in some other direction also? Though back to back, but can it be in like other directions also, or it is
Yeah, I
always?
mean, no, it can be. See, for example, the thing is you're asking this is a
I'm
process where
asking basically
no, I will
the
tell you.
angular
So
distribution of
I
this
am telling
decay.
you. So this is simply Z naught goes to mu plus mu minus. But because mu is so massive, nothing prevents the mu from emitting a photon. Okay, so I can have Z naught goes to mu mu gamma. Then they will not be back to back. What will happen is that one mu will be here, maybe the other mu will be here, and then the gamma will balance it. So for the gamma, there will be no track over here, but there will be energy in the electromagnetic field. There will be one little yellow bit over here. That will be there. But you see that there's a higher order process because when you emit a gamma that is proportional to E, so the cross section is proportional to E squared, which is alpha, which is 1 by 100. So the probability of finding mu mu and a gamma is 1/100th of the possibility of just finding mu mu. Okay.
I'm asking, suppose we are producing mu mu only.
If you're producing mu mu, it has to be back to back because
Back
the
to back.
initial
But
energy was back to back, right?
but can
You're
it
in
be
the center of
rotated
momentum
also?
frame, right? How can it? Then
Yes.
you won't have energy momentum conservation.
No, no, ma'am. I understand it should be back to back. All I'm saying is, can it be rotated?
It can be in any direction. We don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, yeah. In this plane, it could have been in along this direction or along this direction.
Yeah.
It can be in any
This
direction.
okay.
Because the momentum is zero in net momentum is zero in the initial state. The net momentum has to be final in the final state. Zero in the final state. But this is exactly what we meant when we did go into two kinematics. When we said that the azimuthal angle phi is irrelevant, right? So this is the question you're asking. What is the azimuthal angle phi? We don't know. It will be anything. It could have been in any direction, right? It will be the
Yes,
same.
ma'am.
That's
Yes,
exactly now I understood your question. Yeah. So phi could have been anything. It just happens to be almost vertical here. It could have been horizontal. It could have been. I mean, this is like northeast southwest, right? It could have been northwest southeast also. Any direction or east west direction. Any direction it could have been. Okay. Shall I proceed to more on the quarks? So this is now you understand that instead of a single track, if I have many, that is a jet and indicates a quark. So now you can see here, what have we got? So I have one jet, two jets, three jets. I'm not going to tell you electromagnetic, hadron, energy, nothing. Now we have 1, 2, 3 jets. And you can see how the 3 jets form. So E plus E minus goes to Q bar. And any one of the quarks could have also emitted a gluon. Now, I just told you that the probability of muon emitting a photon is very small because it's down by a factor alpha, which is 1 by 100. But here, alpha strong is very large, it's 0.1. So, about 10% of the time, you will see actually three jets. And these three jets the total momentum will add up to 0. And the third jet actually is a gluon jet. Fine. Now, what is this event? Can anyone tell me what is this event? I'm not going to show you the answer. So you can see either the left view or the right view. So are they quarks or leptons? First tell me this.
Ma'am, quarks.
They are quarks. They
Very
are
good.
quarks.
How many jets are there?
There are four.
Four. Very
Three.
nice. Four. You can see, right?
4 jets.
Four. Here.
Okay. Right picture 4.
Yeah. Yeah. You can see that the northwest jet has low energy because it's bending more. And in the southwest jet also, some are more energetic. They are practically straight lines, but others are low energy, so they're curving much more. See, the more it curves, the lower the energy. Okay, you can see that here also. The more it curves, the lower the energy. But you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 jets are there. So what is the event? If you look at the top thing, E plus E minus goes to Q bar, G, right? 2 gluons are emitted. Okay, I hope you can see the bottom picture. So both the gluons could be emitted, one from Q, one from Q bar, or both from Q bar, or both from Q, or all the possibilities. And here, a very interesting thing: gluons have self-interaction, which photon does not have. We will do this in detail later, just for you to appreciate what these events look like, right? Fine. Should I go on, or maybe I will stop here? These are the LEP2 events, which has higher energy. Just tell me what this is. We'll stop at this. This you should tell me what it is, right?
This is gamma.
Very nice. Gamma, gamma. No track.
Yeah.
Immediately you know it's a neutral particle. Energy only in electromagnetic calorimeter, not in hadron calorimeter. That's your gamma. So please, here is your link. Please look at the questions and answer them. You can see very interesting. Here is your diagram. Here are more events. I won't do this. You can do it yourself. Okay? Fine. Did you understand? You got a feeling for what these events are? Is everybody clear about it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am,
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
in a quark jet, can there not be by mistake some leptons also in the jet?
Inside the sea, okay, it's possible that if you have a very complicated system, that a lepton which was anyway emitted was also in the direction along which the quark was emitted. Then you have a lepton inside the quark jet. But again, for what is the process by which a quark can emit a lepton, can only be electromagnetic or weak, right? So strong interactions means that a quark can, okay, let us go to that quark going to quark gamma. Here, let's go to a simpler quark going to quark gamma. As I said, the probability of finding gluon emission is very high compared to either electromagnetic, which is photon, or W or Z, which is weak. Because weak by nature is very weak. So the stronger interaction of the two is electromagnetic, but that is also down by 1 by 100. So the probability is only 1 by 100 that you'll actually emit a photon, and then that photon has to produce some lepton pair. It's more likely to produce a gluon, which will then again hadronize into some hadron and not a lepton. Okay. So inside the jet, you expect to see only hadrons. So it's very, very unlikely, unless, as I said, there is some other, let us say that a photon was emitted here, and this photon was emitted along the direction of this quark, then you might find some lepton activity inside the jet. But those are all very, very small, as I said, because when you compare electromagnetic scattering with strong interactions, that probability is down. Okay? And another reason I'm showing you LEP events is that it's much cleaner. It's a very simple system. Your initial states is electron-positron, which have no quark, no strong interactions in them. So all the complications, if any, come only in the final state. Whereas if you look, yeah, ask.
So low energy particles have larger bending radius.
Low energy has larger bending radius. No, bends more.
Smaller radius.
Smaller radius. Here,
V cross V is equal to mv square.
Yeah, so so just solve mv squared by r is q v cross b, right?
So r is proportional to v.
Yeah, so
okay,
r is
so it
equal
bends
to
more. Yeah.
r is equal to mv by b. Actually, you can take the relativistic formula. It's p by b, p by qb, right? R is equal to momentum p by qb, where q is the charge and b is the magnetic field, right? So when the momentum decreases, the R decreases, right? I mean, just solve it. mv squared by r is equal to the Lorentz force, okay? Just solve that. Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So as I said, I won't continue here. You please take a look if you're interested. There are some nice, interesting events. You can see that it becomes more and more interesting. But I will stop here and I will go on to the next process. Now, this is the Fermilab detector, and Fermilab had proton anti-proton scattering. Okay, so what we had so far was, what we saw in LEP was electron-positron scattering, and this is also an old experiment. It has proton anti-proton scattering. So you can see the initial states also are hadronic states, so there is a lot of confusion, but I will just talk about only this process. So you can see that what happens is that within the proton, there are many types of quarks, U, D, S, so many things can be there. So you can have a process where Q bar, where Q and Q bar are different particles, will annihilate to form some, say, W boson. That's a weak interaction. And then the W boson has to decay. So let us say that Q bar will go to W, and the W breaks up into another QQ bar pair, but because there is so much energy, it can break up into a very heavy quark pair. And that can be, for example, top. It can go break up into top times some other lighter one. Maybe it was QQ bar goes to Z naught, which can then break up into W goes to TB bar, for example. So I have QQ bar goes to W, which goes to top times B bar, or top bar times B. We don't know which way it will go. So you have a single top. So this is what the process is: a single top accompanied by the bottom with a weak interaction. So what happens? The B just gives you a B jet. Okay. And what does the top do? The top also breaks up into a quark. So the top breaks up into a quark, and then it can break up into a muon and a muon neutrino. And the muon neutrino will not be seen. So what happens is that you can see, in fact, by eye, that if you take the red, the green, the purple, and they don't add up to zero, this black line shows you the missing momentum, which is where the neutrino should have gone. And you can add up these from the missing momentum, from the unbalanced momentum, you know what was the momentum of this neutrino. You can add that all back and find that the top quark mass was 180 GeV. So you will never see actually a top quark by itself. The top quark immediately decays, mostly to B quark, and either two more quark anti-quark pairs, or it will decay into muon neutrino or electron neutrino pair, or tau neutrino pair. Okay, and that's the kind of signature that you will see in the detector. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I want to just show you that how these. So you can see this is actually they have drawn the beam pipe. So you can see this is the beam pipe. Central part is always tracking, then the electromagnetic, then finally the muon return yoke and stuff like that. Okay, so the detectors are very similar in kind. So now finally we have to go to PP, which is the LHC, which is the new thing, and we ask how the oh, I seem to have lost something. Yeah, I lost some process. Okay, so let us look at PP process. Okay, so what I mean by showing you this diagram is this: the top quark is produced, and then immediately it decays. So the W decayed into the muon and the muon neutrino, and this B jet is what is seen. Okay, that is what you had. Now, that means that, yeah. Can you just speak a little louder? Hello? Who was speaking? I couldn't hear.
I think it will be better to write in the chat box.
Yeah, write in the chat box. I don't see anything in the chat window, nor am I hearing any question.
Not yet, not yet,
Okay.
not yet.
Was it Vaibhav, and did we lose him? Yeah, we lost Vaibhav, right?
I think it was Koina.
Oh, it was Koina?
I
Koina,
think.
Koina, can you type your question in the chat box? Yeah, she's unmuted, so it must have been Koina. Can you type it in the chat box? But we also lost Vaibhav, I think. Yeah.
Meanwhile, can I ask a question?
Please ask. Yeah.
So, ma'am, we can actually get a mass from this reaction, as you said, by.
Yes.
Uh, so, how do we know it is the top quark? I mean, we need to
So
have a
the
theory for top quark also, no, to
yes, we
match
need to
the
have a
result.
theory. Yes, you can see that the way particle physics is going, it is very difficult to find a particle unless you already know that you expect to see it there. Okay, so a lot of theory goes into the simulations and data analysis before you actually extract anything out of it. So in fact, it's very important for people to understand what is being put in and what is being brought out. Because you don't put in something and then get out that same thing again, right? So it's a very very complicated thing. People have refined their codes for years to understand what it is that they are feeding into the code and what it is that they are getting out from the data analysis. So you can't simply just in the beginning you could see that with Z boson it was very straightforward, right? You add up the invariant masses of electron, positron, or muon, anti-muon, and you get the mass of the Z. Get the mass of some particle. You don't know what particle it is, but then you can study its properties. You can find that it's a vector particle. Because you can study its parity, you can study its charge conjugation, you can study many things about it, and you can study it in more complex processes now that you know it's there. Okay, fine. Okay, good. I mean, this is an answer to Koena. Okay. So, but then as it becomes more and more complicated, you have to use many very sophisticated coding techniques to actually extract this information. So I had so basically what I wanted to say is that you produce the particle and it decays. So as you go to higher and higher energies or very large mass particles, you don't expect it to sit around like electron and you don't let it sit there and you measure it's like this Millikan's oil drop experiment. You cannot measure its charge and stuff like that. It's going to be produced, it's going to decay. And so you have to have a model for its production mechanism and you have to have a model for its decay mechanism, and there are uncertainties in both of them. So when you say that you produce the Higgs, there are so many ways to produce the Higgs. So I'm going to now show you the LHC data. Unfortunately, I think I deleted that one particular uh, uh, diagram where I talked about how Higgs is produced. Okay, so you have proton in LHC, whereas this what I'm showing you was proton antiproton. You have proton in LHC. So the simplest process by which Higgs is produced is that two gluons fuse and produce Higgs directly. But very often what happens is that Higgs is produced in association with either a W or a Z boson, and that's called associated production. So quark anti-quark produces H plus W or H plus Z. And then the Z decays and the H decays, and then you have to find out of the decay particles. See, you have to see, that you don't know whether, see, they're calling this the B jet, but this is also a jet. So we don't know whether this adds up to the top quark mass and this is the remaining B jet, or whether these three are the top quark and this is the B jet, right? So they will make all permutation combination of invariant mass. They will take the invariant mass of 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, to all of the combinations and find which one gives you a constant invariant mass. The others will only randomly add up, right? So sometimes it will add up to one number, sometimes it will add up to another number. But if it was a single particle decaying each time, then the invariant mass will always add up to the invariant mass of that particle. And that's how you're going to figure out that there was a new particle. So you have to now separate out when you see the Higgs production mechanism and decay mechanisms, that let us say that Higgs is produced along with Z. Then Z decays into so many particles, H decays into so many particles. But in the detector, you will just see the sum total of all those particles. So it's like a permutation, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Which set of particles makes up the Z? Which set of particles makes up the Higgs? So first I'm going to show you the results as an animation, and then I will actually show you one particular event and say this is how they actually got to the Higgs detection. So this is the famous channel that we talked about. Higgs goes to gamma gamma. This is the cleanest signal. I have two photons. I think Weber correctly identified two photons in. He's still missing, I think. No, Weber, yeah. Anyway, so two photons is that there is no signal in the tracking chamber, and only in the electromagnetic calorimeter you're going to see any signals. So it's a very clean signature of Higgs. So this is the final number of events, and along the x-axis is the invariant mass of the gamma gamma. Okay, so if you can see this process, I will start it all over again. Sorry, what happened? It is not showing up again. Oops. Just one moment. Yeah. That is not showing the animation, so I will just show it to you again. Here, can you see this? Okay, I'm showing you a different one. So you can see that this is all the background. Okay, there is no signal yet. So the background here is nicely fitting, the red color background is fitting the data. But here you can see that the data is far above the red color background. There is a gap between the black dots, which are the events, and the red, which is the background to the ZZ production. And the reason is that, and they now focus on this, is that if you have a particle which is at 125 GeV, then, and if that is the Higgs, and it decays into 4 leptons because Higgs goes to ZZ, one Z decays to 2 leptons, the other Z decays to 2 leptons, sorry, it seems to be in a loop, then you can see that, then it will match the data exactly. Can you see this animation now? It's repeating. So you can see the excess here at around 125. So these events are very far above the background. Okay, and then you can see that you can fit it to whatever mass, and it best fits to a mass of 125. Did you understand this? Now next, let us go to the next one. This is the gamma gamma signal that I talked about. Can you see this, or it's only visible to me?
We can see the animation.
You can see the new animation? Okay, fine. I was not sure if the, because I'm showing the whole desktop. See, now you can see this is 125. See how the signal is finally showing up after 1 year of data, okay? Can you see? This is exactly 1 year of data. And this is when they finally announced the Higgs discovery, 126.8. This is the excess. Nice, right? You can see this is how the data is taken. So the last one is all the channels. You can see that whatever you had, well, you have to see one electron, one muon, and missing energy. So it could have come from WW or ZZ, WZ, W gamma, TT bar, single top. All the background is not adding up to the signal. The signal is less than the background, you can see. Again in this 125 GeV region. Okay, and this is the data minus background. So there is extra data which is not being managed by the signal. And once you include the 125 GeV Higgs, then you can see that the data minus background goes to 0, and it nicely fits the data. So is this clear? Is it understandable? Yeah.
So data is simulated by us, the data background.
Data is all simulated by theory. Okay. So sorry, not sorry. Data is sorry.
No, I mean the background.
Yeah, the background. All these colored things are the theory, and that black is the Atlas data. Atlas was one of the experiments, which was again 4 experiments at LHC, which saw the Higgs.
Yes. So the data we simulate by theory, we consider all the possible
backgrounds that can be there, and whatever is missing, we assign to Higgs. Is it clear?
Okay.
And that Higgs includes production and decay. So that's what I'm saying. That is very, very important to understand. That it includes production of Higgs from PP process and then decay in this mode into WW, so that it gives you something which looks like the signal. And since you can see that the data is dominated by the WW channel, which is pure WW without the Higgs resonance, and that's why the WW also peaks around the Higgs mass. Okay, that is the reason that even the background peaks around the mass.
Higgs was known in theory from 80s, right?
Higgs was known in theory from 60s or 58 or
60s.
whatever, whenever 59, 60, whatever, 61.
Why did it took, I mean, this much time? Was it experimental?
Yes, very nice. Now I will show you the experiment. This is how the actual event looks. Okay, so just close this. Just close this because now you're seeing my entire desktop, right? So now you can see this is how the event looks. So on the left hand side is the experiment. Both are from LHC, which is, as I said, they threw away the LEP experiment and put the LHC PP experiment there. This is again looking into the beam pipe. The left hand side is the experiment called Atlas. On the right hand side is the experiment called CMS. And CMS had a huge Indian contingent actually, which was part of this. By the way, Topcock also had a huge Indian component to its discovery. Maybe you can read about it. So you can see that in the left-hand side, you have to now look very carefully. Can you see 4 red lines?
Yes, sir.
So those are the 4 muons. Okay. And there are 2 green lines, which are the 2 electrons. So what has happened is that this is the particular production mechanism. I'm really sorry I deleted that page. Maybe I should just find it. So this is the production mechanism where you have the proton hitting each other. The underlying process is QQ bar, producing Higgs plus Z. So this is the Higgs plus Z. Okay, both of them decay. So Higgs decays, Z decays, and all of them are decaying leptonically. That means it's a very clean event. You can see there's very little messy stuff over here. Okay, because they're all decaying into leptons. So it's a cleaner signature. And what you have to do is that there are so many objects here. You have to take every particular permutation combination and see which one adds up to the invariant mass of the Z and which of the remaining then also add up to an invariant mass, which you will call the Higgs. Is it clear? On the right hand side, you can see that there are the same process, Higgs plus Z, whereas Z is going to E plus E minus over here. So you can see that the E plus E minus roughly comes from a Z which is going in the middle direction over here because they're roughly of equal energy. And so the Higgs should have been going back to back with it. And the Higgs actually went into CC bar. So this is the charm and anti-charm. And there are actually 2 jets here and a lot of noise, which I will not explain. Okay. So this is how the process looks. And then you can see that a lot of coding is necessary to extract out the images or to extract out the details from this process. Okay. And here, if you look at, oops, no, not this one. Let's just look at I lost that also. Sorry, there were just too many things open, and when I restarted, I didn't restart everything. Here. So you can see this is a typical event. Oops. There should have been a bigger image. But anyway, I think you can see this, right? So the red lines indicate where the protons are coming and interacting. So the central point. And roughly on the average, each of these events produces about 3,000 of these lines, 3,000 particles in the final state. Okay. So this is the central tracking part. And you can see that there is energy out here. So there's energy in the electromagnetic calorimeter, in the muon chamber outside, everywhere. Okay. In the hadronic calorimeter, everywhere. But in the central region, you can see that unless you have really fine tracks, and actually now these pixels are about a micron in size, you'll never be able to separate out these tracks. You have to separate out each one of these tracks. You can see actually what a difficult task this is. Okay. So now you can answer this question. Why is it that they did not see the Higgs 40 or 50 years ago? Okay. It needed this kind of technology. And that technology is really like some fantastic technology. And to see the physics from such a mess of data, you can, actually enjoy yourself. You can see, look at these events. I mean, like, this is how the events look. Okay. So you can please look at the events and just marvel at, how people have actually discovered such things and how painstaking it must have been, what kind of sophisticated coding you must use. So many kind of things. Yeah.
Differentiate these events.
Yes,
Right?
yes. So that's what I'm saying. So it requires a lot of, people use things like neural network analysis. So there's a lot of software going into finding, because if you give even one graduate student one track 3,000 tracks in one event, I think that entire 5 years will go into analyzing one event. Okay, but now millions and millions of such events have already been analyzed. So all of it is done through software. Okay, okay, and but it's very very sophisticated software, but very very challenging. And you can see therefore that a lot of theory goes in. So I wanted to just show you that unless you put in, sorry, I don't want to go to something new here. Unless you put in the background theory, okay, you will not see that excess, which is the Higgs. So there's a lot of input going in. There's a lot of our old knowledge going in to extract out the new information. Okay. So if you want, you can look at LHC is because LHC is at started out at 7 TeV on 7 TeV, and then 8 TeV. Now it's running at 13 TeV, 13 TeV, or 14 TeV. So 1 TeV is by the way 1000 GeV. So this is 7000 GeV on 7000 GeV particle. Okay, and therefore you can see that you can produce 4 top quarks also, TT bar, TT bar. That much energy is there in this process. And if you look at those events, that's really a mess. But they have been able to identify those events. And so basically, this is the name of the game. Okay, so you can see from very, very simple events which look like this. So this was the learning that was required, 25, 30 years of learning to end up with events which look like this. Okay, is it clear? I think this is a nicer picture than the other one. So are we now clear about really what are these processes and how they happen? So that you have some feeling for the experimental input that goes into it.
Yes, ma'am.
I hope you appreciate at least a little of it,
Yes,
because and also it saved me the trouble of showing you those notes which you have to read so carefully. And next time I will try to go to the institute and actually will
So,
derive
ma'am,
a section on the board. Okay.
the theoretical background that we used,
Yeah.
that theoretical calculation didn't consider this Higgs channel, right?
It does. When you put in the Higgs channel, only you see that extra piece, right? That you can see
No,
that the Higgs
that
channel
is the
is
data,
the
ma'am.
red
Yes,
color. No. The data are only the black lines.
yeah, ma'am.
Data are only the black dots. This red color, which you will see now, is the theory.
Okay,
It says that if I take a standard model Higgs, which has mass 125 GeV, and interacts according to FIFO theory with other particles, and put it into your theory, then it closes the gap between my remaining theory and the data.
okay.
So, for example, what has been done is that if you look at this other graph, this is the graph that we look at. Thankfully, it is stationary. What they did was that they first said, let us put the Higgs at 100 GeV. Then you put a little bump over here. Then let us put the Higgs at 120. Then let us put the Higgs at 200. Then let us put the Higgs up to 600 GeV. They did the simulation. What the events will look like if the Higgs had, because I had no idea what the Higgs mass was, and LEP had ruled out up till about 90 odd GeV. Okay, that's why they are searching in this range from 100 onwards, because the lower energy range was already ruled out by the earlier experiments. So they have put in the theory in their simulations all possible Higgs masses and then compared with the data, and they find that it comes out correctly over here. This is the where it actually matches, and the number of events. So you can see that the position of the events, the excess events, tells you what the Higgs mass is. It tells you that it's around 125 or 126 or whatever, and the height of this excess tells you what is the coupling strength of the Higgs to all the various particles in your standard model. Is that clear? If the Higgs had a very very
Yes, ma'am.
strong coupling, then this peak would have been much higher.
Yes, ma'am.
The fact that it took 1 year to even get this little excess, by now, by the way, this is 8-year-old data. By now, the Higgs peak is really very high. I just wanted, this is the the whole excitement in 2012 when the Higgs was discovered, right? I had been teaching by then for about 15, 18 years, Higgs boson in my theory, same particle physics 1 course, saying that we don't know what the Higgs is, but theory believes that it's there because that makes the standard model consistent. We'll see why in this course. But you guys have never known a world where Higgs was not there, right? So you cannot imagine the
Yes.
excitement when this Higgs was actually discovered. I never believed it would actually be discovered in my lifetime. Okay? Just shows really what people can do, what challenges people can rise to. And the fact that, not just the mass, because the mass is actually not predicted in the theory. So we had no idea what the mass was. But the coupling constant, yes. And the fact that because the coupling constant, the self-coupling of the Higgs is also related to the way the Higgs couples to particles and gives them their mass. And we will see that again in the last part of this course. Okay.
So
Ma'am,
now
I,
why
I
this is increasing?
Tightly tied up. Huh? Yeah. Now
So
the signal will increase, right? The signal will increase as you get more and more data.
so coupling. I mean, signals peak is related to coupling, right?
Yes.
How is coupling really
No,
increasing?
coupling times the exposure, right? The number of events. You can see that in 2011 there's hardly any events because the coupling strength is not very large. Okay. So you have to keep on building over a long time.
Coupling on
More and
in
more
what sense?
events.
I am
Oh,
actually not in understand.
the coupling is this. You have here, which is on the left hand side, PP goes to Higgs, right? How does PP goes to Higgs? Let us say that GG goes to Higgs. So here, the Higgs does not couple to gluon directly because Higgs couples to massive particles. So Higgs will couple to, is there any diagram? 1 second, let me see if I can find a diagram. It couples through a loop. GG to Higgs. I mean, it will be faster than by writing it so badly in. Probably this is Higgs decay. Here, this is the process. I don't want to click on it and waste time. Here, you can see this, right? So one gluon comes from one proton, the other gluon comes from the other proton, and this triangle is all possible quarks. Because the Higgs coupling strength is proportional to the mass of the particle it couples to, the most likely particle in this loop is actually the top quark. Okay. And so this coupling constant, which depends on the mass of the top, is also related to some other things in the theory. And therefore, you can see that if you don't have enough energy to produce top quark, if you produce only D quark, then the probability of producing the Higgs is much lower because the probability of Higgs coupling to B quark is proportional to MB, not MT. And therefore, LEP did not find it, and therefore, LHC found it. Right?
So as we increase the energy, this will increase.
Yeah, and then of course as the Higgs decay, so you have to have couplings on both sides. Here the Higgs couples to whatever is the mass of this. Let us say it is going to ZZ.
Yes.
It will go to ZZ star because it's not enough energy to give you, because Z is 90, 90 plus 90 is 180, this is only 125. It will give you ZZ star. But this will then be proportional to the mass of the Z.
Yes.
So the production and decay will depend on all these parameters. And so the excess events that you will see, so that was, for example, it will not be, let me see if the process where gamma is there is somewhere here. Because of course gamma is massless, so it will again couple through a loop. Think of the inverse loop. Think of a triangle here and producing gamma. Instead of GG, think of the mirror image diagram producing gamma. Okay? Right? And so that will also depend on the couplings of all those quantities. Coupling of gamma to the quarks, coupling of Higgs to the quarks, and so on. Okay? That whole diagram, therefore, will depend on all those coupling constants. But you see that Higgs mass is only 125. So if you go back to that diagram, I hope I can find it. Sorry, let me look for it. Here, sorry, okay. So here you can see that this extra peak will always be here at 125 because there is no particle at 150, there is no particle at 105 and so on. So this excess events will keep adding only here. This will just remain the background, right? And so the significant, as time increases, the background will also increase, but the Higgs peak will also keep on increasing because there is a peak sitting over there, right? There's an excess, the cross section, there is a resonance over there. Okay. And finally, I didn't show you that Z resonance, but I think I will stop here. I just want to show you that this is the PDG. If you search for PDG, I wanted to show you the Z resonance, but I will stop the class here. So if you click on PDG, it will show you, for example, summary tables. It will show you reviews. So it will tell you, for example, it will show you what is the, I wanted to show you here. It will give you a review of kinematics. It will tell you the cross sections for certain processes. It will plot the cross sections also for certain processes. And I wanted to show you here how the E plus E minus produces QQ bar and that extra factor of color factor of 3, but I will show it later in the class when I actually calculate it. Okay. But there are very nice things over here. You can see it has astrophysics cosmology. It has standard model. Of course, this is all written very tersely. It's for people who already know. But if you want to look up something, I mean, starting with the periodic table, you can look it up here. And it's a very nice place where, the latest data. This is, for example, 2020. And you can look for every year. You can look. They have the authoritative latest information on this page. So it is called PDG. It is maintained by LBL. And you can look for it online. Okay, it's a very useful thing. So I think, okay, I will stop here. I hope you have understood now how these particles are detected. Very different from the kind of theory that we do. So there's a huge gap between the theory and the actual experiment. And it's important to appreciate that. But this course, of course, will only concentrate on the theory part of it.
Then, what can be the time scale of this collision?
Time scale of it just collides, right?
Yes. No, I mean, it is a one-time collision, right? We get a
So you're
data.
talking about, yeah, so the collision and the decay process. So the final states are produced within how many seconds, right?
Yes,
That you
ma'am.
remember I made a mention of it when we talked about various processes.
Yeah, ma'am. That
Strong
depends on the
interactions, yeah, 10
process.
power minus 23 seconds, okay? And for electromagnetic, it's around 10 power minus 16 seconds. And weak has a huge range. Anything greater than that, and as I said, up to neutron, which is about 13 minutes.
You said ki the background increases as the time passes on.
Yeah, because more events are produced everywhere, right? More events are produced in the background and more events are produced in the signal.
Okay.
Right? But because the signal is at a resonance, the signal will build up faster than the background. That is why in 2011 you did not have much signal, but as over 1 year the signal improved enough for them to have a publication. Is it clear?
Okay. Yeah.
If the signal and background had increased at the same rate, there's no point in taking data over longer time, right? Because this is a resonance process and the cross section is higher over there, the events will add here faster than they will add at other points. And another thing you might want to notice is if you remember in the kinematics, 2 going to 2 kinematics, this did not be 2 going to 2, but we did only 2 going to 2. Your kinematics was, that whole term was 1 by 64 pi squared s. So 1 by s, okay, and this is effectively root s. So you can see that the events are decreasing with energy. This is always true. Okay, the events cannot increase with energy, they always decrease with energy. And the resonance is overlaid on top of that. So this is a Breit-Wigner resonance, which is overlaid on a falling background. And that falling background, as I said, also has to do with the fact that there is an unitarity of the S matrix, which only the field theory course people will explain to you. But this is always a consistent feature. You will always see that the cross section decreases as you go up in root S energy, whatever. Okay. So you start appreciating these things one by one. Okay, I think that is very important. Then the nature of the theoretical expressions that we are deriving will become more amenable to you. You will understand why all those terms are there in those cross sections, because physically they have some interpretation. Okay.
Ma'am, what is
Yeah.
FB inverse? What
Sorry?
unit
What is?
is F inverse?
Oh, this is femtobarn. I told you the cross section has dimensions of area, right?
Area.
So area is meter squared or whatever, and one femtobarn is 10 power minus 24 centimeters squared. So since these cross sections are all so small, you don't want to write it in terms of 10 power minus 24 or 10 power minus 30 times some meter squared, centimeter squared unit. So it is usually written in terms of barn, and femtobarn is 10 power minus 12 times barn.
Ma'am, what is M gamma gamma?
M gamma gamma is the invariant mass of the final state 2 photons.
Okay.
So it is, let us say P1 is the momentum of this gamma, P2 is the momentum of the other gamma. So P1 plus P2 whole squared, square root is what is M gamma gamma. Because we know that PH squared is equal to P1 plus P2 squared, but PH squared is MH squared.
And
Right.
root S.
Therefore, the M gamma gamma should add up to the mass
Yeah,
of the Higgs.
mass
That's
of
why
the
you see
Higgs.
the peak directly at that mass of the Higgs. Root s is the momentum of, let us say that the electron, the proton is coming in with some energy E, momentum P in the plus Z direction, and the other proton is coming with equal and opposite energy and momentum, equal energy and opposite momentum. Then we know that S is P1 plus P2 whole squared, which is simply E1 plus E2 whole squared. So root S is just E1 plus E2. And since E1 and E2 are the same, this is actually root S by 2. So PE is equal to root S by 2. So that is a 3.5 TeV proton hits a 3.5 TeV proton, producing center of mass energy, root S is 70. And this is the final state, because a lot of energy is lost in the Higgs production, right? There are other particles that have been produced, like Z or W or top or whatever. There are so many channels in which this is produced. They have only pulled out the decay part of Higgs to gamma gamma and plotted only that part of the decay rate. So this is actually a decay rate. This is the events as a function of that energy or whatever mass, that invariant mass. Yeah. So although I did not in detail explain all this to you in the classes, I thought it's maybe useful for you to see these things so you appreciate more what we are actually going to complete. Are there any other questions? Okay. So I think that I don't want to do the gamma matrix now. We will do it in the next class. Okay. We will hold it. Yes, Koina, ask the question. You have something on your chat. Let me just look at my chat screen. Okay. Can you type your question, Koina?
Sorry, ma'am, I was
ask.
going to the chat and I just pressed this by mistake. Like.
Oh, okay, fine. No problem. No problem. It's okay. Good to know that people know how to raise their hands. Okay. Fine. Okay, shall we stop now? Yes? Okay, fine. Okay then, we'll continue in the next class.